Hey gorgeous, I'm doing a little bit of a throwback here. So I made a keep or pass video a while back with like 100 and something old wedding traditions. I'm sure I didn't get all of them, or like some probably weren't even that traditional. I'm not sure. It's been a while, but I kind of took the list that I still had, and there were a few that I didn't explain because the video was getting very long, and it was more like a hey, think about these things more than a like hey, here's my experience type of video, even though I did talk a lot at the end. Regardless, I kept track of, there were some where I wanted to explain more but didn't feel like I had time, or there were a few that I just didn't know what I was going to do yet. So this is me kind of going back and explaining or saying what we actually did. So, number one, the first one was the groom asking for the bride's dads for permission to marry. So that one was one that, so Jake didn't really want to ask my dad. In his mind, he's like, well, I'm asking you, it's your decision, you get to decide if you marry me, right? And I believe that's true as well, obviously. Like, I don't really think my dad would have said no, though. And my dad is a more traditional guy, and I knew he'd just really get a kick out of being asked. So it was my request that Jake asked my dad for my hand in marriage. Because, like I mentioned, I'm like, he's not gonna say no. My family likes Jake. I often made jokes with my friends and like family, and honestly, like my officiant at our wedding, my friend made a comment about like, oh, Stacy, you and Stacy got along so well that when you started dating, she always made jokes about how we liked you more than we liked her, and she was right. And played it off like that. So everybody loves Jake, and I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. And Jake he didn't quite ask. It depends on who you ask. And from what Jake told me, which is the one I sort of believe a little bit more, he was kind of like, hey, so I'm thinking of marrying your daughter. And he didn't really ask the question, he just sort of stated it, but made it sort of seem like a question. And, you know, from my dad's point of view, he's like, oh yeah, he asked me, and of course I said it was fine, and, you know, goes on and on about it. So I wasn't there. I can't say who's right. These are just the versions I've been told. So it was all my idea. Jake didn't really feel like obligated to do that. Well, he felt obligated after I asked him, but he didn't really plan to do it. That was all my doing. So it wasn't some like, I don't know how to describe it. Because if people do want to do that, tradition is totally fine. We did, like, no big deal. But that was number one. Number two was the man proposing to a woman tradition, and we kept that, but this also has a little bit of a story behind it. This is one where I knew Jake really wanted to be the one to do it. I knew he wanted to propose to me. I wasn't, you know, one way or the other, as long as we were married, I was cool with it, but we had actually had a conversation. I can't remember exactly what day anymore, but I kept it in my phone. We had a conversation in the car, and he talked about how he wanted to propose within, we hadn't been dating this long yet, but he said, oh, I think like 2 or 3 years is a good time to like propose. Like after dating. And he's like, I think, because we'd already like kind of talked about it at that point. And I was like, okay. And I set a reminder on my phone, because I told him, if you don't propose on that day, I'm going to do it. And, you know, he sort of forgot all about it. And, well, maybe he didn't. He don't know. He has a really good memory, so maybe he did know and just didn't say anything to me. But I started learning the ukulele. I found a song called Perfect 2 by Auburn, and I changed the lyrics to be more personal to us. And I basically, like, that day that I'd said I would, like when the time frame was up, I just sort of like serenaded him on my ukulele, and I was like, I'm not going to say anything, because he hadn't proposed yet, because he wanted to wait until things were more settled due to the whole COVID situation. So I was like, so I didn't really like say it, but I was like, this is sort of my reverse proposal. So I did sort of get something out there, and he knew how I felt. And I still, of course, I wanted to wait for him to be able to do it, because I knew it was important to him. So I didn't do the get on one knee or like give a ring or anything. He wanted to do that, so I wanted him to do that, you know, like sort of compromise. So yeah, that was the sort of with a twist I mentioned in the past video. So number 6 was about asking parents for money. And this one is one where we passed on it, but I'm going to explain. I said this in a different video, but I'm going to explain why that didn't really work out for us. because with my parents, they had a set amount they gave to my other siblings. And so they told us, like, we didn't have to ask. They told us, like, yep, we're doing that. Like, this is for you. This is for your wedding. No strings attached. But with Jake's parents, we didn't have a discussion at all. We just sort of were like, well, they didn't say anything, and like, we don't really expect this, so we'll just pay for it ourselves. And it sort of bit us in the butt, because then we picked our rehearsal dinner spot, which was at a picnic shelter at a park, and we decided to do pizzas from like a local pizza place. And it was only after we like decided all this and like put money down on stuff, basically, that we went to his parents and they asked, like, oh, we were thinking, like, do you want to do like tap room? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And we're like, oh, actually, we already like figured it all out. And we tell them all our plans and whatever. And they're just like, oh, but you didn't want to do something else? And we're like, oh, well, we wanted to save money for like the actual wedding, so we're just going to do cheaper on that. And they're like, well, we're paying for that. Like, we're doing the rehearsal dinner. You know that, right? And we're like, no. We never had that conversation. And they did wind up, they paid us back for the park shelter that we'd put money down on, and they bought all of the pizza, and they brought extra food to the rehearsal dinner too, and it was super kind of them. So I would say, even though we passed on it, if you think there is a chance or anything, just be like, hey, where you plan to contribute at all? Or if not, no pressure kind of thing. Like, just sort of bring it up in a little way, just so they don't feel like they need to pay for a bunch of things. But if they do plan to, then you know. But I know that can also kind of bite you in the butt, because I'm only speaking from my personal experience, where it would have been nice to know, because then maybe we could have done something like a little nicer, or like if that was what they'd wanted, because we never had the discussion. So I honestly don't know how they had expected the rehearsal dinner to go. It all went off without a hitch, and it was totally fine. I thought it went well, but maybe it wasn't what they had envisioned for their son's rehearsal dinner. So that conversation just never came up. So that's why I recommend it. But I know you know your family situation better than I do. So if you don't think that would work out for you, that's honestly, like, we didn't either. And, it would have been fine if we hadn't had any money with it. So moving on. Number 12. This one was asking family to be in the wedding party. And this one I said pass, but there was an exception. I had my youngest sister was my maid of honor. We have like a 9-year age gap, but we've always been very close. And I know in the past I'd promised her that I would make her the maid of honor at my wedding. I honestly don't remember when I made this promise, but I remember making this promise, unless I made it up. Like, even if I didn't make this promise at all and I just asked her to be a maid of honor, I have no regrets whatsoever. It is a little weird of a situation, because I have 2 sisters, and my other sister I didn't include in the wedding. But she has a son, she has her own fiance, like, she has her own wedding plans, like, in progress, and she had just had a bunch of stuff going on. So I was like, well, and like, I also didn't include, I have 4 brothers, I didn't include any of them. I didn't include my sister-in-laws at all. Like, my family's just so freaking huge that it was either include the entire family or do friends. And I have so many friends, and it was like, so I had 6 bridesmaids, 1 was my sister, and then 5 were friends of mine. And Jake had his brother-in-law, and then 5 friends of his, but I mean, his brother-in-law is his friend too, that kind of thing. So it's like, his sisters didn't included, like, my sister and my brothers didn't get included. It was really only 1, and part of me is like, maybe that wasn't fair, maybe I shouldn't have. But I know one of my brothers too, like, we kind of pick and choose. Like, he had one of my brothers and then like one of my sister-in-laws in his wedding, but that was it. He didn't like include anybody else in the family. No, my sister-in-law and sister. So he like had a couple. I just picked one. So I was like, wow, she's the one I'm closest to. Not that I don't love my entire family. Like, I don't want this to be misconstrued at all, but it was just sort of how the cookie crumbles. Whatever that phrase is. Whew, I needed to go get some water. Have you guys seen my baby? Look at this guy. 64-ounce water bottle. It's my favorite. Present from Jake. Perfect husband. So where was I? I was on, 15 was ring bearer. So this was one we weren't sure on, because as I mentioned, the family's huge, and I also have nieces and nephews, and for flower girls, we did twin girls that I used to nanny because I was close to them. And they're like a little older. My other nieces are like 2-ish, and I wasn't sure how they would do. And then I didn't want to like do nephews, because then I have 4 nephews, and I was like, well, who do I pick? Like, do I pick one? Do I do all of them? That's a lot of kids. So we were just going to skip it. But then, I think I mentioned we had big wedding parties, like we had 6 on each side, And one of our regrets is that we didn't have 7 on each side, but it just didn't happen. So how I sort of tried to remedy that was having my 7th be a reader at the wedding. And very last minute, like the week before the wedding, we're like, hey, we should ask like Jake 7th, a friend of his, like, hey, we should see if he wants to just carry, we did a little book for our, like, as a ring bearer thing. Because we were going to have our friend the officiant carry it up. But he was also a groomsman, so we kind of wanted to be like a surprise that he was the officiant. So we're like, well, we should have someone else carry it up and then give it to him. And we're like, that's perfect. We should ask him to do it. And thankfully, he agreed, and we were very grateful to him. And then he got to walk up with our readers, so they both were like in the wedding processional, basically, which was very nice, and I was glad we got to include him. So we did do a yes on the ring bearer. Now, 19 was the wedding workout plan, which I said we did, but like, we were honestly working out already. I mean, I guess Jake wasn't so much. And so it wasn't really like a wedding workout plan. It was more just like a general working out plan because we both wanted to do it for a while. We also we tried a couple diets, but they kind of fell by the wayside. And honestly, like the last like month or two before the wedding, we were just so like frazzled that we weren't really paying attention to our diet so much. We were exercising, but the dieting wasn't going so good. So it was a sort of doing it thing, but it was just one of those things that is like a general like good health sort of thing to get into, and not specifically because of the wedding. So number 28 was the bride doing the majority of the planning, and I want to defend Jake here on this one because it kind of sounds bad, and I'm like, yep, we did that. I planned the whole wedding, but that's because we're different planner types. I'm a very anxious person. I need things to be planned out in advance, or I can't do them. Even like the day of, like if Jake in the morning asked me like, hey, do you want to watch a movie tonight? That's like not enough notice for me. I need to have it planned like the day before or 2 days before. Otherwise I just can't commit to it. Like if it was too short notice, I like am not prepared, and it's hard. So so when it came to the wedding, of course I want to do everything like immediately right away. Whereas Jake's more of like the procrastinator type. I will say though, like, even though I did the majority of the planning at the beginning, near the end, Jake really like came in clutch because of his procrastination type of planning, because we were like a month or 2 out from the wedding, and suddenly like I'm like, this is too close. I don't care anymore. I can't do it. Like decisions don't matter. Like I've done as much as I can. Like, and then Jake was the one who's like, oh, we need to call this person. Like, oh, we need to set up a final meeting. We need to do this. And so then Jake was doing like a lot of the stuff on the back end of things that, you know, I just couldn't bring myself to do anymore because it was getting too close and I was getting too nervous about it, which doesn't make sense, but that's just kind of how my mind goes, I guess. So he did help plan. It's just that my planning was 1.5 years out and his planning was like in the last month. And he did help in the middle. If I asked him questions, he answered. And we had like our weekly meetings where we talked about stuff. So just because I did a lot of stuff doesn't mean he didn't do anything. Number 30 was wedding theme, which I said we passed on. But I'd say we sort of had a theme throughout. And it was just music. Like music was the theme. I wouldn't say it was like the defining thing of the wedding. Like I don't think many other people would have noticed that. But the prelude music, the music we walked on the aisle to, the DJ songs, like the sheet music on the tables as part of the centerpieces, the like sheet music flowers that I made, being in a dinner theater, like it was very musical. I put a lot of thought into the music. I worked very hard on those playlists and trying to find songs that people would dance to, or songs that seemed like romantic enough for us to like walk down the aisle to or have played before a wedding. I just put a lot of thought into music because it's something that's very important to me, and it's also very important to Jake, and he's introduced me to so much great music since we've met. So that was sort of our theme, but I guess to be fair, I couldn't say it was like the only theme, so I guess we like half did it. Number 32 was premarital counseling, and I said we did it, but with a twist. And that's because we didn't go to an actual person. We actually had a night where we just got like a cheese plate and some wine, and I made a Franken list of a bunch of premarital marriage questions like I'd found on the internet because of who I am as a person. So we went through this giant Franken list of questions and we answered them honestly, and a lot of them we pretty much already knew the answer to, and a few we had some discussions about, and all in all it was a good time. And stuff like that I highly recommend in general. So not that specifically, well, I mean, yes, that's specifically for like a wedding, but a more general like date night idea is one thing Jake and I have done before is we did the same thing, except we sat and we had like a piece of paper and a pen, and we made like a list of things we wanted to accomplish in the next 5 years. And we did that in like 2021. And now we just still have those and like have them as kind of a marker. Like, are we meeting our goals? Are we accomplishing this? Or just kind of like, I put a little reminder in my phone to tell me like 5 years is up. Did you do it? Like, look at your list. How'd it go? And it's really fun to make your list and then discuss it and then be like, yes, I would like to do that too. We're like, oh, that's really cool that you want to do that thing. So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent, but recommend it. Number 38 was printed RSVPs. I think I wasn't sure. We ended up not doing printed RSVPs. We did send out printed invitations. We did do that. But we put a link to our wedding website. We used WithJoy. And we just had people RSVP online. I will say, this can be a pain in the butt. There were probably, this is going to sound like a crazy number. We invited 250 people. And maybe like 80 to 100 of those people just never went on the website. We had to text or call them. And I inputted it on my own. So like I could do that for people. And the majority of the people who didn't respond were no's. Like they probably were just like, oh, well, if I don't answer, they'll know I'm not coming. But, I still ask people. So the majority of people were no's, so it didn't really matter that they had to RSVP online anyway. But maybe if I'd sent them a card, they would have checked the no box and sent it back. But it worked out fine. I didn't really mind asking people, or like my mom asked people for me. So that made it a little easier. And I still think it's a pretty good idea. Most people are like tech savvy enough to just do it. I think a lot of people just were like, well, if I don't, that people thought it was like maybe like a Facebook event where it's like, well, if I don't respond, that means I'm not going, or I can change my mind later or something. But, we needed those final numbers. And yeah, don't regret not doing the printed RSVPs. It saved us a little bit of money. Now, number 40 was a day of coordinator, which I initially said keep. But I was a little overly optimistic on that one. So I learned throughout the process that we actually had a venue coordinator, not a day of coordinator. They bill it as a day of coordinator. Like, they don't tell you it's not a day of coordinator, but it is just a day of coordinator. I will note they did set up a lot of this. Like, they set up some votives. They set up the table linens. Like, they set up everything but the centerpieces. So, like, that was done. But I feel like that was other people, like, who worked there and not her specifically. Or people, like, I guess they do work under her, so it counts. And she did do a lot of meetings with us. We had a lot of discussions with her. We had a lot of things figured out. She did come to the ceremony site and she told people when to start walking up while the music was playing. And I'm honestly not sure what she did. I know during our reception, I saw her actually going over and like pouring wine for people, which was interesting. And then she came up and told us that we were out of wine when she was the one who told us that we had enough wine. But anyway, so it didn't really feel like we had a day of coordinator because we didn't. We had a venue coordinator. But I had planned stuff pretty well, and the venue did take care of a lot of things, even though it wasn't like a day of coordinator specifically. So everything still went off just fine, even though we didn't have one. And yeah, I'd say like, even though that ended up being like a pass technically, it still worked out okay. And if you are overly organized, you probably don't need a day of coordinator. But that's just my experience with it. I felt like I had, my anxious self had a handle on all this stuff, so it went okay. Now 46 was hair and makeup artist. I said pass because I was going to do my own makeup. But actually my sister-in-law ended up doing it for me. She offered and she did it for me. She did a great job. So I guess it's still a pass because she's not like a pro makeup artist or a pro hairstylist, but she's very good at it. So I guess it's still sort of, I guess I'll say it's a keep. Like, I'll change that one and say it was a keep. Even though I did get her a gift, but it wasn't nearly as much as I probably would have paid an actual hair and makeup artist, So, yeah. She's great, though. 47 was guest transportation, and I passed on it, and I wanted to explain why, because it sounds kind of crappy to not have transportation for guests. But the reasoning is, our ceremony was at 3:30 at the ceremony space, which we assumed most people would be coming from, like, home. A few people did go from the hotel, and it was, like, 10 minutes from the hotel, 10, 15 minutes. But most people were just going right to the ceremony site. Because we couldn't, if they were checking in for that day, you couldn't check in until, like, after our ceremony had started. So we knew they couldn't check in yet. And we also did have, like, a little bit of a gap during cocktail hour where we planned to let people, like, obviously they could check in, they could pregame, like, whatever they needed to do before the wedding. So, and then they could just, like, come into cocktail hour, like, slide on it whenever they felt like it. But since most people are coming to the ceremony site, and the ceremony is 10 minutes from the ceremony to the reception, we're like, well, most people just use their cars. And, like, we carpooled there, like, our bridal party and families carpooled there, like, whoever was at the hotel basically carpooled and then carpooled back. But the other reason we didn't have transportation is because our reception space was literally, like, in the same parking lot as the hotel that we had rooms blocked at. So everybody could just walk from where the reception was. Like, if they were tipsy at the end of the night, which we were a little bit, well, I mean, not so much, but a few people were, like, we could just walk from the reception to the hotel. It was like a 2-minute walk, not even. So that's why we didn't provide transportation. Everybody was fine. Like, I don't think anybody had any issues with, like, trying to drive drunk or anything. Like, because, yeah, we thought that through, and that was one of the selling points of the venue, was how close the hotel was to the reception space. So we didn't have that issue. It almost would have been weird to have transportation from the hotel then. 53 was something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. And I said pass, but we ended up doing it. Something old. I guess, to be fair, I wasn't sure if this was something I had to be wearing. Our something old was the goblet we used for our Unity ceremony where we made our drink. And that was a gift from a friend from a long time ago, and we really liked it. So we used that as our something old, but I guess maybe it doesn't count, so I didn't wear it. Not sure. But something old was that. Something new was, like, my dress and, like, my skirt and basically everything I was wearing. Like, the skirt I literally got the day of, so that was pretty darn new. Something borrowed. I borrowed a bracelet from my mom. And something blue, I wore All Might socks from My Hero Academia, and his color scheme is blue, so that was what I ended up doing. It was kind of like a bunch of little nods. It's like, my mom loves bling, so I wanted to borrow a bracelet from her, and I got a little blingy bracelet, and I wanted to show off the anime socks, and the skirt was new anyway, so it was kind of throwing everything together, and it just worked out that way. 57 was bride and groom gifts. I said keep, but we actually passed, because my gift to Jake was, like, a boudoir photo shoot book, but because the photographer got COVID, I didn't end up getting the book in time. And then Jake, I was like, don't worry about it. So he didn't get me anything either. And it was fine. We didn't really need gifts. Like, our gift was marrying each other, I guess. So it's the ultimate gift, I would say. Number 60 was not seeing each other until the ceremony. And we passed on that, and we have 0 regrets. It was so great to be able to, like, have breakfast with him and hang out with him. And, like, we did split up to put on our outfits and stuff, and then we had our first look. But I was very happy to not have to spend the day just, like, waiting for the aisle moment so I could see him. And honestly, like, even if we had waited all day, I don't think Jake would have gotten emotional. There's no way of knowing. I don't know. Maybe if we do a vow renewal one day, I'll just, like, ditch him for the whole day and then see him at the end of the aisle or something. But honestly, I don't know if that's a thing you do with vow renewals. But I don't have any regrets about it. I thought it was a great day to spend with him and my friends and family. Number 65 was the pro-officiant priest, which we passed on. We had a friend do it, and it was the best thing ever. I mentioned one of the jokes he made. It was very us. Also, he just, like, was on the ball for everything. He reminded me to do the bouquet toss, which I totally forgot about. He told us, since we referenced in our vows, each of us in our separate vows, we'd reference doing, like, a high five on our second date instead of, like, a goodnight, like, kiss or hug or anything. And so he said, hey, when people clink glasses, you should do a high five for the first one. Like, he had so many good ideas. His delivery was great. He stepped out for pictures so he could get, like, the kissing photo without, like, you know, a head in the background. He just, like, was so on point. He'd never done it before, but he did such a great job. And I know he was a little nervous about it, but he did amazing. So I have 0 complaints. I'm sure pro-officiants can be worth the price, but, and obviously I think we spent, like, probably what we'd spend on officiant, because we paid for his hotel rooms and, like, got him gifts and stuff for being a groomsman too, but it was worth it. It was great to have that personal touch in there. And, like, I basically wrote the whole ceremony, and then the part that I mentioned, the joke he made, we told him he could put just a story about us in there. And so that was a part he wrote, and it just made it more sentimental and just better. 68, giving away the bride. I said pass, but we sort of kept it. So we didn't There was no wording about it. There was no like, who gives this woman to this man, like stuff at all. But I did have my mom and my dad both walked me down the aisle. I gave them hugs. The music kept playing though, so there was no verbiage about giving someone away. They did walk me up there. I didn't walk up by myself. So they did kind of like technically bring me up there and give me away, but they didn't say so, and they just kind of sat in their seats, and it was nice. So that's sort of. 69 was like the bride standing to the left of the groom, which I hadn't heard of. And we ended up doing it, and then we had my family sit on like the opposite side, and his family sit on the opposite side so they could see our faces during the ceremony. We only did that for our immediate families. Like, we made reserved signs, like, oh, this is Stacy's side, like, you know, parents and like siblings and whatever. Like, I had 3 rows of reserved seats, and Jake had 1 row of reserved seats, but we tried to put them on opposite sides so they could see us. And that's kind of how people sat. So that's just how it ended up going. We didn't really have like a pick a seat not a side, or like sit over here, have like, we didn't have like legit ushers, but it worked out really nice. It was nice to be able to like look out and like see the people I like knew the best, really. 77 was wedding signs. I can't remember what I said in the original video, but we put reserved signs on the seats. We put a bar sign so people knew like what wine was there and what beer was there. And I think that's it. I don't think we did any. Oh, we did a seating chart. We did a seating chart too, but because there's so many people. But besides that, we didn't do any, like I said, we didn't do a pick a seat not a side. We didn't do like a cards and gift sign. We didn't do a welcome sign. Like, we're like, we don't need it. It's fine. We're just doing like the bare minimum that like has to be done, really. So we sort of kept that, if I didn't say that before. Number 83, the grand entrance. I wasn't sure about this in the original video. We wound up not having our bridal party do it. We just let them go and sit down when everybody else was seated. And we went into our cocktail hour, so everybody had seen us already, so there wasn't really a grand entrance. But we did kind of hang back while everybody was sitting down, and the DJ played like our entrance song. And so just Jake and I kind of danced through the tables to get to our seats, just the 2 of us, which I liked a lot. I thought it was fun. And a couple of people in the wedding party thanked us for not making them do like a dance or whatever. So it was a good choice on our part. 97 was saving the top tier of cake, which I wasn't sure about. And we did not do that. We completely forgot to ask for any extra cake, even though like the main food at the place we couldn't have taken, but the cake we were allowed to take home. But we just totally spaced, did not even ask. Luckily, the bakery we went through, they do anniversary cakes. So if we contact them like the week before our anniversary, they'll just give us a small 2-person cake. So we'll get cake then. So even though we didn't save the top tier, like ended up passing on that one, we will get an anniversary cake. So it'll be a little fresher and less freeze and burnt. Okay, so 98 was the bouquet toss. So I ended up passing on this. We did still do something similar. So this was something I saw online. I don't know if it's like not popular anymore, if it was just popular briefly, but it was called a ribbon bouquet. And basically you have little ribbons coming off of a bouquet, and you slowly cut them off, and whoever's holding the last ribbon, they get the bouquet. And I didn't have flowers at my wedding, so instead of a flower bouquet, I made just like a little bouquet with candies in it. Like, so I just kind of held up my little candy bouquet, had the ribbons coming out of it, and just slowly like cut off the ribbons. It was also our way of including people who weren't single, because anybody can just grab a bouquet of candy and eat it. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a single lady. Like, anyone can do it. So it was nice because I only had like 14 ribbons, but I feel like if we'd only had like single people do it, there'd only be like 3 people up there holding a ribbon. But we had all of them were taken. Some of the groomsmen had them. Like, one of the groomsmen tied the ribbon around his head, and like a bridesmaid tied it in her ponytail. It was very cute. So highly recommend it, especially when you want to include more people. Obviously, you could do more ribbons than I did. I made the mistake of, instead of like a small like I don't know, half-inch ribbon, I did like huge like 3-inch ribbons. So they were just too big and unwieldy, so I couldn't do as many as I wanted. But it worked out perfect, and I'm glad I did it. So I guess we sort of kept a bouquet toss, but it wasn't the traditional way, and I just got to hand it to somebody. So it was really nice. Highly recommend. Number 102 was late night snack. Wow, I did go over 100. 102 was late night snack. I did say pass. We ended up having more money in our budget than we expected because people decided not to come to the wedding. So we ended up doing a popcorn bar, which there weren't as many people like around still during the late night snack time. a lot of people had left earlier in the night. So there was a lot of popcorn left over. I ended up taking like a box of popcorn home with me, but there's still so much left over, and I was so upset. I wish I could have taken all of it home with me, but I just didn't have any room. So yeah, we did end up doing it. I was happy about it, and I got to eat popcorn in the car on the way home the next day, and during our road trip to our honeymoon. So I love the late night snack. 106 was the honeymoon right away. So we haven't done like a full honeymoon. We planned to go to Japan. And we couldn't plan that because the borders were still closed like a few weeks before our wedding, so we did not have time to plan anything. But we went home, our wedding was on a Saturday. We went home on Sunday, and we kind of hung out with our parents, and like we opened gifts and all that kind of stuff. And then Monday morning we left for our honeymoon. So we took a day off, slept in our own beds after, 2 nights in a hotel, which is rough. Sometimes sleeping in a hotel is hard. So we got to sleep in our own beds for a little bit, and then we had to be on the road again. But it was a great time, and it was nice to have that little break in the middle. 107 was carry the bride over the threshold. I wasn't sure about it, and then we just totally forgot about it, so I ended up passing on that one. So originally, we had 60 keeps, 45 passes, and 5 I don't knows. But I did the math, and we now have 66 keep and 44 pass. So kind of close to what it was in the first place. It sort of evened itself out. But yeah, that's the video. That's my explanations. Hopefully that all makes sense. I'm sure this is the update nobody asked for, but I just felt the need to clarify some stuff that I wasn't clear on in the last video. Anyway, I hope you have a great time, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!